Hi everybody, this is Dulcimer. I hope you are doing well. So for today's video, I have a little bit of an unusual question that I want to answer. I can't say that this is a question that I get a lot, but it's definitely a question that I asked myself when I was a beginning hammered dulcimer player. And that is, how do you dust a hammered dulcimer? Now, when I first bought my hammered dulcimer, this wasn't really a question that I even realized that I'd be asking myself. I had never really thought about dusting musical instruments before, but as I had my dulcimer for more and more time, especially since I was living in an older house, I still live in an older house, but a different one, I realized that my instrument was getting dusty fast. Now, the issue with dusting a hammered dulcimer is that there are a lot of strings in the way of dusting the wooden body that is needing the dusting. When I first realized that I was going to have to dust my instrument, I didn't really think it was going to be a big deal. I just grabbed my closest dust cloth and I tried to dust it. Again, like I just said, the issue is that there's a lot of strings in the way. A normal dust cloth can get the very bottom and the very top of this instrument, but it really can't get it all. So came the question of what can get under all of these strings. After the regular dust cloth, the first thing that I tried was this really old duster that my family happened to have. Think of a feather duster, but with wool on the outside. I thought maybe if I just dusted the top of the instrument with that, it would be able to reach under the strings and it would get that dust. That didn't work. So actually the next thing that I tried, and this is probably the most creative thing that I thought of, was, well, what if I got a feather boa? I could slide it under the strings and I could just kind of move it across the soundboard and that would get the dust. I managed to get one from the local dollar store. I tried it. It worked to a point, but unfortunately it didn't work perfectly. So I had to keep coming up with the next idea. What was I gonna try next to dust my dulcimer? Luckily, my next idea worked pretty well. In fact, it worked well enough that I still have it here in my apartment, and that is this. This might look like just a regular old piece of fabric, and in the end that's kind of what it is, but actually what it is officially is a UV blocking gloves. They're pretty common in Japan, not as much so in the United States. I don't know about other countries. But they were really useful in Japan. However, like I said, we don't really use them in the United States, so they were sitting around. It was the perfect sized fabric that I could kind of slide under those strings, kind of rub back and forth like my idea with the boa, and it worked. However, when I got my new dulcimer, this one here, it was just a little bit too big for this to be completely effective. These gloves were really good for my smaller dulcimer, which was a 13-12 size. This, however, is a 17-17 size, so it's just a much larger instrument, and this piece of fabric just wasn't long enough. Luckily, anybody who does play the hammered dulcimer is going to run into that same necessity to dust under the strings of their dulcimer, which means that people have actually come up with real tools for doing the job. So once I got this hammered dulcimer, I went online and I went to see what I could find. And what I came up with was a dusting tool made by the hammered dulcimer player, Matthew Dickerson. So this is a Suede dusting wand, I guess you could say. It is pretty long. It's about as long as my arm, and it's got a nice handle that you can hold. And this part up here is made out of nice dust catching suede. All you have to do is stick the suede part underneath all of your strings and it will grab basically all of the dust. It leaves behind just a little bit in those little corners, but it does a really good job overall. So this is what it looks like. Slide it under there, bring it back down. and ta-da, you can actually kind of see a lot of the dust that it captured. This is not a paid promotion. This is just something that I really like and I think is a great product. Now, as I mentioned, the dusting wand doesn't quite get all the dust out of the Dulcimer because there's some places where it's too big to get into the little nooks and crannies. So the last tool that I use to dust my Dulcimer is actually just this little tiny, completely normal paintbrush that I got from the local hardware store. I think it cost me about $2 max, and it works really nicely to go around the pegs and the little places on the edges of the Dulcimer that the wand just can't reach because it's too big. So that's about it for an explanation. These days with my big Dulcimer, I don't really use this anymore to dust. I've basically switched completely over to the dusting wand. I really like it. It is not a paid promotion, but I do think it is a really useful tool if you are a hammered Dulcimer player. And then you can just go out to your local hardware store and get a little brush for the little parts. And between these two things, you can keep your Dulcimer pretty dust-free, which is great. That's about it for today. I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you again next week. Bye, everybody.